Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Jamie Arrowsmith, and I'd like to welcome you to the last in our series of music and literature chats brought to you by the City of Lakes Music Society in collaboration with the Sudbury Public Library. My colleague, Dr. Charlene Biggs, and I would like to thank Pierre Dubuc at the library for helping us to put this fun little project together. We hope you have enjoyed listening to them as much as we have enjoyed putting them together. Last time, we spoke about the composer Antonio Vivaldi. And of course, Vivaldi's most famous work or set of works is a set of four concerti for the violin called the Four Seasons. In fact, Vivaldi was only one of many, many composers who drew on the idea of seasons and seasonality and on the natural world as inspiration for his compositional material. Throughout the 19th century, actually, it was quite fashionable for composers to draw on natural themes and imagery of nature and so on as part of their compositional process. You know, Beethoven is a great example. He wrote a symphony which has been nicknamed the Pastoral Symphony, his Sixth Symphony. And it has this sort of very rustic feeling to it. And the music is certainly evocative of that kind of country, rustic, pastoral ideal. He wrote a piano sonata, which was nicknamed The Tempest. And of course, a tempest, a storm, is a natural phenomenon. We often hear words like Sturm und Drang applied to describe Beethoven's music. Storm and drama, right? Storms being evocative of natural phenomena as well. So it's not at all uncommon to find music that is inspired by what composers saw in nature all around them throughout different periods of the year. Several composers use the idea of seasons as material for their compositions. One great example is Alexander Glazunov, a Russian composer who lived between the mid-19th and mid-20th century. He wrote a set of pieces also called The Four Seasons, music for a ballet, actually, a one-act ballet set in four scenes. And he explores this idea of being on the cusp of seasonal change, in particular in the third scene, where in the ballet, the mythical creatures of the forest come to life at springtime. And you know, there are satyrs and you know, the personification of the wind and the gods of nature. They all come out and they frolic as the world springs to life. And then as the heat of the sun becomes too intense for them and spring turns to summer, they all run away. It's an interesting idea, and it's set to music really beautifully. And I know that Dr. Biggs is probably going to talk a little bit more about that a little later on. But it just sort of goes to show that this idea of seasonal change and being on that transition period from one season to the other is a really interesting place, and composers have really enjoyed exploring that transition. I'd like to present two pieces by a British composer, both set in different seasons. I guess you could consider it sort of bookending the cusp of seasonality between spring and summer. Composer's name is Frederick Delius, and the two pieces I'd like to talk about are The first is upon hearing the first cuckoo in spring, and the second is in a summer garden. The first, upon hearing the cuckoo in spring, it's sort of evocative of getting to springtime, of springtime finally coming around, and you hear the birds starting to come out. Nature is sort of waking up. And Delius explores this really effectively. We do hear the cuckoo as well as other animals of nature, generally represented in the woodwinds. We hear the cuckoo at the beginning. We hear some other conversation between birds, bird calls in the middle of the piece, and then we hear a clarinet finally offering the cuckoo song at the end as well. The second piece, In a Summer Garden, is really evocative of this sort of lazy, hot, restful, peaceful, yet somewhat melancholy feeling that one has during the summertime. And actually, it came with a couple of literary quotes. Delius included these in the score, in the manuscript, and I'd like to read them for you now, if I could. The first is by the Italian poet Dante Gabriel Rossetti. It's from one of his sonnets, and it goes like this: "All are my blooms, and all sweet blooms of love. To thee I gave while spring and summer sang." And the second quote was probably written by Delius himself, and he wrote it in German. And the translation goes like this: "Roses, lilies, and 1,000 sweet-scented flowers, bright butterflies, flitting from petal to petal, and gold-brown bees murmuring in the warm, quivering summer air. Beneath the shade of the old trees, a quiet river with water lilies. In a boat almost hidden, 2 people. A thrush is singing in the distance." I love the way that the scene is set, not just with the words, but also painted so beautifully with the music. You know, I mentioned that Delius often has this sort of touch of melancholy in his music. You'll hear that in both of these pieces. They're both beautiful pieces, both very soothing, both very flowing, both very, I think, successful at capturing the sort of quietness of the seasons, but both exploring this idea of seasonal change. The cuckoo first coming out at the beginning of spring, and then the second piece talking about how the spring moves into summer. And I think it's appropriate, considering that we are now on the cusp of summer, between spring and summer ourselves. And, you know, we've lived through a pandemic for a long time now. We've been living through it. And, you know, even though the spring has been gorgeous and the summer is coming, and there is reason to hope that we're going to see the other side of this by the end of the summer, there's also that tinge of melancholy with us as well, I think, knowing that it's there, but we're still sort of living through this sad and difficult time. So I think that the music, while beautiful, is also sort of poignant when we look at that in that context. So I hope you enjoy both of those pieces. I hope you have a chance to go and listen to them. They're beautiful, and I think they adequately capture the feeling that we're all experiencing on this period of seasonal change.
Dr. Aerosmith has discussed the fascination many composers have had with writing music that embodies the four seasons. I would like to begin this segment by introducing you to two examples of seasonal cycles that were written for solo piano. Fanny Hensel, born in 1805, was the sister of the composer Felix Mendelssohn, and she was a gifted pianist and composer in her own right. She lived in an age when it was difficult for women to be taken seriously as composers, and some of her works had to be published under her brother's name. Mendelssohn, however, recognized the greatness of Fanny's piano cycle, Das Jahr, the year, and insisted it should be published in her own name. It is a huge work consisting of 12 movements depicting each month of the year, and it takes more than 50 minutes to perform, so it is quite a feat for the pianist. Despite its length, it never bores, captivating audiences with beautiful melodies, original harmonies, and flashes of brilliance. One of my favorite movements from this work is May, a sunny, charming work she composed shortly after her arrival in Rome on a warm, beautiful spring day. Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky is another composer who spent a good deal of time in Italy, but his cycle, The Seasons, more aptly describes his native Russia. It is another massive work describing each month of the year, and it clocks in at just under an hour in performance time. It was written fairly quickly, in the 5 months between December of 1875 and May 1876. The titles for each month suggest that he had particular poems or epigraphs in mind as he composed each movement. And according to Tchaikovsky's friend Nikolai Bernard, June's title, Barcarolle, was based on an epigram by Alexei Plestcheyev. And it goes like this. Let us go to the shore. There the waves will kiss our legs. With mysterious sadness, the stars will shine down on us. Tchaikovsky deftly captures the hint of melancholy in the epigraph. June Barcarolle opens in the somewhat somber key of G minor, and the tinges of wistfulness in the opening phrase is maintained when the melody moves into the happier key of B flat major. The middle section is in G major, and it is a much happier affair. We hear drone figures in the left hand that represent a country scene, perhaps a picture of peasants dancing. The final section returns to G minor, finishing with a coda that moves from the very bottom of the keyboard to the very top, and then fades away in a repetition of the G minor chord. Claude Debussy was born in 1862 and died at the end of World War I in 1918. He was fascinated by spring and wrote 4 works on various aspects of the subject. The earliest, Printemps, or Spring, is an orchestral suite in 2 movements and was composed in Italy, where he was studying after winning Paris Conservatoire's prestigious Prix de Rome competition. Debussy was a talented painter, and that artistic sensibility shines through his music, which is both coloristic and pictorial. In February of 1887, he wrote his thoughts in a letter to a friend on what he was trying to achieve with Printemps. Quote, "The idea I had was to compose a work in a very special color, which should give a great range of feelings. I should like to express the slow and labored birth of beings and things in nature, their gradual blossoming, and finally, the joy of being born into some new life. All this is without a program, For I despise all music that has to follow some literary text that one just happens to have got hold of. So you will understand then how very suggestive the music will have to be. Lily Boulanger was born in 1893 and was the first woman to win the Prix de Rome competition. And she did it at the age of 19. Compare this to Debussy, who was 23, and other prize winners who were even older. She was a child prodigy, sitting in on classes at the Paris Conservatoire from the age of 5. And she sang, played the piano, the organ, the violin, the cello, and the harp, and did all of them well. Sadly, her life was to be a pitifully short one. She contracted bronchial pneumonia at the age of 2, and it permanently weakened her immune system. This eventually led to intestinal tuberculosis, and it killed her at the age of only 24. A Morning in Spring was her last composition. It was composed in 1917 and was originally written for piano and violin, although she later arranged it for flute and piano and for piano trio. In January of 1918, she wrote an orchestral version of this work, and it remains the most popular version of the work today. It is hard to believe it was written by someone who was fatally ill. It is full of the joys of spring, vivacious, colorful, and at times serene.